I'm just out enjoying life, enjoying beautiful southwest Scotland, my current abode. Um, it's still light out, man. You know what I mean? Beautiful pier. So yeah, I've been catching up on the 2019 Rugby World Cup. That was the last World Cup. I was actually in Russia at the time. I missed a lot of games, so I just wanted to review just my take on the knockout stages. I remember because South Africa lost their group game to New Zealand and Japan had beaten Ireland and Scotland, and they were the home team. And at the time, they were looking like the fifth best team in the world or something. And I just thought, they beat South Africa before. I actually had Japan picked to win that game. And then I had Wales picked to beat France. Because Wales did fantastic in the groups. They handled Australia, Actually, they were up by 18 points that stage, and the Australians, they're never out of it until they're out of it. I thought Reece Patchell actually. I would have thought he was like the third or fourth choice out half. Great player, but they have so many players. But he, I think he had the game of his career that game. But anyway, France were unlucky, I believe, to lose that quarter-final to Wales, but it's kind of like the rugby gods, because if you remember 2011, Wales had a red card and Wales were unlucky to lose, and this time it was literally like the opposite. So I had Wales against Japan in the semi-finals. Could you imagine? That would have meant that one of them would have got to the finals. And then the tougher side, I believe, of the draw was New Zealand, Ireland. Unfortunately, even though Ireland are 3 out of 5 in their last 5 tests, it seems that when it really matters most in the World Cup, New Zealand just had Ireland's number, and I think New Zealand were at that was it. Steve Hansen's last World Cup, and it was Kieran Reid's last World Cup, and I think that was just the last little bit of peak New Zealand. New Zealand, they're a phenomenal team, best team over the last 20 years, but I think their prime years that I can remember were 2012 to 2015. And then, the crack started to show a little bit. All credit to Ireland, 2016, first win, fantastic. The Lions series is split. So you're seeing that New Zealand weren't invincible anymore, like they had seemed. 2019 World Cup, I thought I was watching the highlights of the England game, and I thought England showed a masterclass how to handle the All Blacks, holding the All Blacks to only 7 points. I think they didn't even score until an hour of the game. So I thought England gave a fantastic blueprint on how to beat the All Blacks, and out of all the teams the All Blacks have lost to in the last year, now obviously they usually win more than they lose, but recently they've looked more beatable than usual recently. I thought England gave the best performance I've seen against the All Blacks, in the last 5 years anyway. So England got to the final, and due to their dominance over the All Blacks and in the groups, and they trashed Australia as well, so they were looking like the Southern Hemisphere killers. And then South Africa they got to the final quietly. They didn't set the world alight in the groups. Against Japan, they handled them, but Wales ran them very close, and I remember England were favourites, but South Africa just seemed to be a bad matchup for England, especially in games that matter. If they play them in Twickenham, England are probably usually gonna take it. In the November series, that it is what it is. Summer test South Africa. I think South Africa have had a slight edge over England, but that's my breakdown of the World Cup. The less said about Ireland, the better. But that was Joel Schmidt's final. I don't think it really gave Joel Schmidt. I don't think he got the send off that he deserved, because if you look at all the Grand Slams he won, right, at the end he lost to fucking Japan and New Zealand, and they didn't. I just thought that it was unfortunate that Ireland haven't cracked past the quarterfinals yet. You know, when you look at like Wales and Argentina have reached the semi-finals twice each. I think, why can't Ireland do that? And unfortunately now with the World Cup, the seedings the way it is, the best 4 teams at the moment in world rugby, 2 of them aren't going to reach the semi-finals because of the seedings. So France have New Zealand in the group, and Ireland have South Africa and Scotland. Now, you know, I don't want to write off Scotland, but realistically I think the chances are Scotland aren't going to make it out of that group. But then that opens the door for the likes of England, Wales, who else will get through? Argentina, Australia. So it's too early, I think, at this stage to predict who's going to win the World Cup, because you know there's more than a year to go, and I think, you know, New Zealand could be a completely different team by the time the World Cup comes around. Especially, you know, they're a great team, still the 3rd best team in the world in my opinion. But they haven't been the same since Steve Hansen left. They haven't replaced Kieran Reid. Even since their last World Cup win, really since 2015, they've gradually been deteriorating, but they were still up there until after the World Cup. And then I know the pandemic had a lot to do with it. They were only really playing Australia and, like, you know, Argentina the odd time, but they played Australia something like 10 times in the last 2 years. But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think it's unfortunate that you know, that 2 out of the top 4 teams are going to be knocked out in the quarterfinals the way it stands. And you know, as an Irish fan, of course I want to be optimistic, but that's an unfortunate draw for Ireland. But yeah, that's my take on the state of affairs. And the Rugby World Cup is the best sporting competition in the world. It's better than the Lions. The last 2 Lions I thought were actually relatively disappointing. Close games, very interesting, but you know, and then obviously the football, you've got them fucking diving around like Tom Daly and on fucking 150k a week, and they're fucking Michael Phelps, whatever the fucker is, but their fucking gust of wind would, you know, blow them over. But fucking real men's sports, competitiveness, drive, heart, wanting to be the best, not looking for fucking fouls and decisions. That's why rugby and MMA are the best sport in the world. I don't mind soccer, but it's gotten too commercial. That's my opinion on the matter. Have a good evening.